Hey guys, this is Moo Power here doing another commentary. This time it's going to be a Protoss versus Zerg matchup on Python. And here, just going to show you guys another macro style game. And yeah, one of the challenges I see with Protoss versus Zerg matchups, if you're new to Brood War, is obviously the Zerg style is more of like a they're basically a race about just swarming in large numbers. The other style that they do is also a very tricky or trickster type of play, where they can be very variable when it comes to certain strategies. So if you don't know what you're doing or don't know what the Zerg is doing against you, even though you may have technically the stronger army, they could still win in certain situations. So you got to be on top of that. So I would compare Zerg to like a trickster style, whereas Protoss is more like a straightforward style. Not to say that Protoss can't do a strategy that surprises the Zerg, because there are definitely timing attacks where you can definitely catch the Zerg with their pants down. So here I'm just trying to scout the Zerg base and see if he got a spawning pool, because that's very important to know when you get the spawning pool. In this matchup, when you go fast expand build, you want to build a forge when they build their spawning pool. So that's just kind of an equal way to think about it. So you need the defensive structure. You need to start building the defensive structures if they build a spawning pool. But here I can see that he's definitely trying to do a 12 hatchery build. So he's trying to deny my pro from stopping his drone to make the hatchery, which normally I would block the drone from placing it in a in an optimal position. So either he has to try to scare my probe away, or have to place his hatchery another place, because you don't want to place your hatchery inches away from the minerals because you couldn't place at the right spot, obviously. So here I'm just checking to see when he's going to place the spawning pool, but it doesn't look like he's going to place it anytime soon, so I can afford to place the gateway first. Now you see here I measured to see where the forge would align, and that's very important, so that way I have a really good tight wall when it comes to the build. The reason why I put the forge below the gateway is because it creates an airtight wall where lings cannot simply go through them. Because if you make the gateway below the forge, if the forge is on top, even though it looks like the building is a tight wall, it's not really a tight wall. Lings will pass through if you do that. You can test that yourself if you don't believe me, but that's basically the StarCraft kind of architecture, design, dimension kind of thing. So here my expansion is now up, so I'm going to transfer probes, and he decides to take my second gas, or the gas at the natural base, which I don't see a problem with, because my cannons will take it out, because they're going to be in range to take out that extractor. And I don't even get my second gas that early anyway, so it's not a huge deal, because I need the minerals at the start more than anything. So he finishes the extractor, but I think it was a waste of money. And I can see that he's going 3 hatchery into some kind of aggressive build, because I scouted the base on the 9 o'clock position, and that's usually where Zerg likes to expand. They don't typically expand at the 5 o'clock base, simply because I mean, if you think about it, 5 o'clock base is okay because it has the gas, but you're only getting one base off of that. If Zerg was able to get the base on the 9 o'clock position, then that's where they can, if they can successfully defend the 9 o'clock position, they automatically can take the next base on the main at the 8:30 o'clock position. So if you can defend his third right there, then it's a free base on top. So that's why I feel like Zerg, that's why Zergs typically take those kind of bases. And he probably wouldn't have taken the 12 o'clock base unless he was trying to be sneaky about it. But I checked there anyways just to make sure, because again, if he defended the 12 o'clock base successfully, then he can of course take the next base up. So yeah, I don't see that he's doing that. So he must be going for some kind of all-in strategy. And you see how he's not spending his larvae. So he is probably saving up to get some, you know, attack units or something like that. Or that, or his macro just sucks. Well, at this point of the game, I don't see any reason why he should save his larvae like that. I think his macro just kind of is poor. So that kind of, at this point, I'm thinking this Zerg isn't that great. So I can kind of relax, but just be aware that he might try to do some kind of Hydra push where, before my units start getting into play, he might try to bust all in. Because as you see here, I'm spending, a lot of resources on tech buildings because I had to spend the money for forge, cannons, assimilators, citadel, cybernetics core, and then eventually a Templar archive, which allows me to tech up to Templars because Templars are very necessary to deal with the massive unit count of the Zerg. So you see here on the minimap, if you noticed a second ago, there was a large group of units there. I'm assuming they're Hydras because Lings at this stage of the game is terrible. So if it was Lings, that's even better for me, but I'm assuming it's a Hydra because I didn't have a chance to look at what killed my probe. And the reason why I used my probe to scout before my Corsair even was finished was by the time the Corsair finishes, if you time it right, the Corsair should pop out at 5:45 and should be able to scout the Zerg by then. But the timing push of a Hydra all-in aggression is right at that time. So if your Corsair just pops out and the Hydra already, come knocking at your front door, then that's way too late. So you gotta make sure you also scout using a probe and not just rely on your Corsair. So there shouldn't be a minute that passes by without knowing what the Zerg is up to, because Zerg within a minute can have a number of Hydras and then you're dead. So it's just in the beginning stage of the game, obviously, because you had to invest a lot of money for defense, tech units, and then finally you're starting to mass up Zealots, which don't fare too well against a critical mass of Hydralisks. So normally, in a straight up fight, Zealots would of course, tear Hydralisks to shreds, but in a critical mass, Zealots don't fare too well. So here, it looks like he has a lot of units, but the cannons do a lot of work in repelling that attack. So I thought for a second I was going to need the probes to defend to protect my cannons, but as you can see, defending against the Hydra bust is pretty much best when you have them alternate their attack pattern, because they either have to focus your Zealots or they have to focus the cannons. If they try to do both, then you're basically giving them more targets to try to win the fight, which effectively increases your chances of winning, because if there are more targets for them, then they can't effectively pick off your army or the cannons because they have to deal with both at the same time, which you can get rid of units quicker if they're isolated, obviously. So that's the kind of concept you have there, because they have to either focus one or the other, otherwise they're going to have to deal with them at the same time, which obviously they don't want to, but that's why the Zealots are in front. So if the Hydras try to kill the cannons, the Zealots will punish them, and then vice versa. So as you see here, what I should be doing, I got the Storm upgrade, so that's good. But what I should be doing is constantly scouting the Zerg base to see, if he's continuing with this Hydra aggression. But at this point, I don't need to make any more cannons because I'm pretty confident in my army that, even without the cannons, I could probably survive. Well, actually, with the cannons, I will survive. So here I land a great storm over those Hydras, and they take a lot of damage. Plus, all the Lings just melt with the Zealots with the cannons aiding. So I pretty much only lost a couple of units, while he just, if you saw that bloodbath, it's pretty obvious who lost more there. So here I'm just going to push out, punish his army for staying here because he overstayed. At this point, he should have just retreated. I just have too many Zealots to his Hydras that, didn't do squat. So his all-in aggression did not pay off. All I had to do was just commit to building a few more cannons, and my army is going to deal with him. And the reason why I got observer tech a little early, usually in this matchup you would see observers come into the game around 10 minutes, which I started getting them around 8 minutes. But the reason why I got it early is because you have to think of it logically. If Zerg is already committed to going all in, the next step, if he can't finish me off, is to go for lurker tech to try to contain me, which is not going to work now because I got observers. So that's always staying one step ahead of your opponent, and just constantly scouting his bases. And I see that he made a third base at that mineral only at the what is it, the 7 o'clock base, just above his main base. So I scouted that, and he just recently started, and here I see how he planted some lurkers to try to defend against that any attacks. So he sees my observer here with his overlord, so I'm going to pull it back and then use my zealots to take out these lurkers without so here just trying to micro keep my observer alive and then storm these hydras. He does a good job of dodging it for the most part, and my units got kind of stuck here because the cannon, as you see there, the middle cannon is kind of blocking my dragoons from getting out. So I have to destroy that cannon to, let my units get out. But I was kind of in a mode of desperation to make sure he can't, kill me when he went for that Hydra aggression at the start. But yeah, so here, just gonna clean up this force, and he's trying to pick off my observer, but I'm gonna micro it away. And here, you see here the dragoons are acting stupid because they can't seem to walk around that cannon and get out. So I'm going to kill that cannon to make sure that, my units aren't going to be troubled anymore, and I'm going to build some cannons at my third. So here's where it's pretty grim, looking pretty grim for the Zerg, because it's now going to be 3 base Protoss versus Zerg, and that's definitely not where you want to be. And you see here on the minimap the Zerglings were heading towards my third base, but I think he realized that the cannons were going to morph in, so he's now trying to pick off some Dragoons. And even though the Dragoons don't fare that well against Zerglings when they're unprotected, you still want to make Dragoons against Zerg because of the Lurkers. Lurkers just do a lot of splash damage against Zealots, so you constantly want to have some kind of range to deal with that. Otherwise your unit will just, your army will melt if it's just consisting of Zealots. So you see here I'm sending my army to kind of protect my newly established bases, because if a Zerg is worth their salt, they're gonna constantly send like a group of Zerglings to kind of snipe your nexus, before the cannons are morphed in. And so you always want to keep some units close by to defend if you are just starting them. Once the cannons morph, then you can, kind of relax and get your army to do something more productive. So yeah, just constantly macroing it up, making sure I'm building more gateways, because I'm starting to get the economy to support them. And yeah, so just re-rallying and hawking more units. And what I should be doing also is just continually scouting the Zerg's main base to make sure he's not doing some kind of muta switch, which I doubt he has the money to do, because his macro isn't that great. But again, that's just, you always want to, not, you always want to, you rather overestimate your opponent than underestimate. So yeah, my cannons just warped in just in time to deal with his Hydras, and then my army is just going to finish them off. So yeah, and then I noticed his Zergling killed my probe, so I'm going to get a few units to deal with that. And then my Corsairs should be continually patrolling around the map to see what the Zerg is doing, while dealing with his little harassment, and also continually macroing out of my gateway. So you see I killed the Zergling, and then now I'm going to build my 5th base versus Zerg's 3 bases. I already denied his 3rd once. All I got to do is just kill it off again, and then he's pretty much toast. Or did I kill it? I don't know. I guess I didn't kill it, but he's pretty much hasn't been mining there effectively until now. So he's really been on 2 bases this whole time until recently. So yeah, I'm gonna pretty much almost be maxed up at this point. I just gotta send my units to destroy his 3rd base, and he's pretty much relying on these lurkers to kind of hold his base, but he just doesn't have the production or the units to deal with my army. Because again, he committed a lot of his economy to that early aggression at the start, and to top that, he didn't have great macro anyways. So it's, on top of not having good macro, his economy wasn't that great. So that's just a no-brainer as to why I'm dominating him in this game. And now just establishing my 5th base. So it's possible to have 5 bases in only 15 minutes. Is, you know, especially when you're dominating like this, you should be constantly expanding. And you know, especially when you have such an advantage like this. When you have a army superiority like this, you always want to be expanding. You always want to be constantly scouting, make sure he never can get back into the game. So it wasn't that great of a game, honestly. It was just simply Zerg trying to do some kind of all-in build. I don't think he realized it was all-in because he still persisted in the game even though his Hydra push didn't do anything. But yeah, it's simply just a pretty easy game for me. I wish my macro and my multitasking was a little bit better in this game, but practice makes perfect. So yeah, so that's all I have for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any suggestions or want to see any particular games, just feel free to comment in the section below. Thanks.